Barça have always been blessed with midfielders. From Iniesta's winner versus Chelsea to Xavi's 4-assist masterclass at the Bernabeu in 2009. From Pep Guardiola bossing the 1992 European Cup final to Pedri dunking on Real Madrid, Barcelona's midfield is a story on its own. When you think about other big clubs, their history is usually defined by goal scorers, but at Barca, it's the midfielders that we remember the most. Obviously, Barca have had some ridiculous attackers over the years. Messi, Ronaldinho, Neymar, Suarez, Eto'o, Ferran Torres, but almost every great Barcelona team had one thing in common: a midfield that completely controls the game. That's been the club's footballing religion for decades. Keep the ball, make the other team chase you around until they want to go home. And right in the middle of everything has normally been an incredible holding midfielder. The guy who gets the ball from the defense, decides where the attack goes, controls the tempo, and always seems to be standing exactly where the team needs him. That's why Rodri joining Barcelona felt so perfect, because Barca already had Pedri, Xavi, Dani Olmo, and Fermin Lopez. Now they were adding in the best holding midfielder of this generation to that group. But this isn't really something new for Barcelona, because when you go through the history of the club, you realize Barca have spent the last 50 years producing, developing, or signing midfielders who completely changed how football was played. You can trace this obsession with midfielders all the way back to the 1970s. When Johan Cruyff arrived at Barcelona, Johan Neeskens eventually followed him. Barca fans literally called Neeskens Johan Segundo because he was the other Johan, but he was a completely different player. Neeskens was aggressive, physical, and ran around kicking the life out of people while still being technically brilliant. Then Johan Cruyff became the Barcelona manager, looked into La Masia, and found this skinny kid called Pep Guardiola. Pep wasn't fast, he wasn't strong, he wasn't gonna physically dominate anyone, but his brain was ridiculous. Cruyff put him directly in front of the defense as the single pivot, and he became the brain of Cruyff's dream team. But even Guardiola couldn't control an entire midfield by himself. Cruyff surrounded him with players who all gave Barcelona something different. Jose Maria Baquero was the physical one. He could make late runs into the box, score goals, and do some of the dirty work Guardiola wasn't built for. Then you had Guillermo Amor, another La Masia midfielder who would run forever and could play wherever Cruyff needed him. And Eusebio Sacristan was another technically clean midfielder who helped Barcelona keep possession moving. None of these guys are remembered internationally like Xavi, Iniesta, and Busquets, but they gave Guardiola exactly what he needed. He could sit at the base and control the game while everyone around him moved, pressed, and attacked space. And it worked. Barcelona won 4 La Liga titles in a row. Then in 1992, they finally won the first European Cup in the club's history. Cruyff had established the formula Barcelona would keep coming back to for decades. Put an intelligent player at the base of midfield, surround him with technically gifted players who understand space, and make the other team spend 90 minutes chasing the ball. Years later, another skinny kid from La Masia took over the role and perfected it. His name was Sergio Busquets. Busquets spent 15 years making the defensive midfield position look ridiculously easy. You'd press him with 2 players, he'd do one little body feint, and suddenly both of these guys were sent to Narnia. He didn't need to fly into tackles or run around chasing everyone. He's not a chicken with his head cut off like Valverde. He just understood where the ball was going. He could receive from the center backs, break lines with one pass, and position himself perfectly whenever Barca lost possession. And with Xavi and Iniesta staying ahead of him, Barca eventually created the greatest midfield trio football has ever seen. Busquets sat at the base. He protected the defense, won the ball back, and gave Barca that safe option whenever they needed to escape pressure. Then Xavi controlled everything. And then you had Iniesta. If Xavi couldn't pass through you, Iniesta would just dribble through you instead. Give this guy a ball in the middle of an orgy and he'd still find a way to wiggle out of it. But what made those Barca teams even more ridiculous was the depth behind them. Seydou Keita gave them physicality and could be trusted to do whatever Pep asked. A young Thiago Alcantara gave them another ridiculously technical midfielder. Mascherano gave them aggression and defensive cover before eventually being moved to center back. Then when Cesc Fabregas arrived, he offered something completely different with his runs into the box and ability to score goals. So Pep could change the midfield depending on the opposition, and the results were insane. 3 La Liga titles, 2 Champions Leagues. And in 2009, they won the sextuple. A proper sextuple, by the way, not like the one PSG had where they can rest their players for half the year and then they only have to play in the business end of the Champions League. Then Luis Enrique arrived a few years later and adjusted the formula. Busquets and Iniesta were still there. Technically, Xavi was still there too, but he was mainly on the bench now. So Ivan Rakitic became massively important. Because when you already have Messi, Suarez, and Neymar in front of you, you don't need another player to try and become the main character. What you need is someone who's willing to run his ass off, and that's exactly what Rakitic did. When Dani Alves flew forward, Rakitic covered the space behind him. When Messi drifted inside, Rakitic adjusted his position. He gave that midfield balance, while MSN worried about destroying everybody else. And with guys like Sergio Roberto and Rafinha providing depth, Barca had enough options to survive an entire season. That's why they won the treble in 2015. Different manager, different midfield, different style, but the same formula. Give the superstars freedom and make sure there's an intelligent midfield behind them, keeping the entire thing together. Now, having a ridiculous midfield isn't just because Barcelona want to play pretty football. It's what allows the entire team to function. When Barca attack, they're usually committing loads of players forward. The fullbacks push up, the wingers stay high, everybody attacks the box, which is great until you lose the ball. That's where the midfield becomes incredibly important. You need players behind the attack positioned properly so that when the opposition clears the ball, they can't immediately launch a counter. Stop the counter before it even becomes a counter. Because with Pep's teams, for example, everybody remembers how good they were with the ball, but people seem to forget that these guys were equally as ruthless without the ball. Under Flick, this became even more important because his Barca team plays much more aggressively than some of the older Barca teams. They don't want just possession for the sake of having possession. They want to go forward. You got Kubarsi, who can fire a pass through the first line of pressure into midfield. Then De Jong or Pedri receives it, turns, and suddenly Barca are attacking the other end. But that vertical style comes with risk. When you attack quickly, you can also lose the ball quickly. And Flick's solution is to immediately hunt the other team down. Pedri, Xavi, Fermin. As soon as Barca lose possession, these guys have to counter press and try winning it straight back. And if the first press fails, then someone like Rodri becomes so important. Because now you've got one of the best midfielders in football standing in front of your center backs, reading where the counter is going, and hopefully killing it before some rapid winger is running behind Kubarsi. That's why midfield depth matters so much. You can't ask the same 3 guys to press, defend transitions, control possession, and create chances every 3 days for an entire season, because their legs are eventually going to fall off. And Barca now have enough different midfield profiles that Flick can actually rotate without seeing a drop off in quality. They have 7 midfielders, all capable of giving you something different. Obviously, the biggest addition is Rodri. We've already talked about how ridiculous this guy is. He's press resistant, excellent in duels, reads danger before it happens. The biggest thing Rodri gives Barcelona is security. He can sit in front of the defense and clean up whatever mess happens in front of him. Then give him the ball, and pressing him is almost pointless. He's the guy who can hold everything together, which then allows all these other midfielders to do the things they're actually best at. Then you've got Pedri, and I can go on for about 20 minutes glazing how good this guy is. He's the brain of Barcelona's midfield. Pedri can play deeper next to Rodri, receive the ball from the center backs, and help Barca escape pressure. Or Flick can move him higher up and let him start creating around the box. That's what makes him so useful. You'll press him and he'll do some little shoulder fake, turn away, and the defender realizes he just ran 5 meters in the wrong direction. He can also slow the game down when Barca are losing control, but then 5 seconds later, play a pass through 3 players that creates an attack. And having Rodri should make Pedri even better because he doesn't have to constantly drop deep and take responsibility for everything in possession. Then there's Xavi. Xavi is what happens when you take a La Masia midfielder and then you give him anger issues. Technically, he's very good. He's also press resistant, can combine in tight spaces, and is so much better on the ball than people give him credit for. But obviously, the thing that makes Xavi so different is the intensity. This guy sees someone on the other team receive the ball, and he takes it personally. He presses, he tackles, he fights for second balls, he annoys everyone. He's an elite rage baiter, and in Flick's system, that's incredibly useful. If Barca lose possession, Xavi's one of those guys you want immediately flying towards the ball, trying to win it back. So against a really physical team, Flick can put Xavi next to someone like Rodri or Pedri, and suddenly the midfield has much more bite. Then Dani Olmo gives you something completely different. Olmo is at his best obviously higher up the pitch, put him between the opposition midfield and defense, and he's constantly finding these annoying little pockets where nobody knows who should actually mark him. If a midfielder steps towards him, there's space behind. If a center back steps forward, now there's space for the striker. You want to leave Olmo alone? No problem. He'll turn and attack you, combine quickly, and he can can either play the final pass himself or shoot from outside the box. He's the guy you want when Barca need to unlock a haram low block defense around the penalty area. And then you have Fermin. He doesn't really want to stand around controlling the game. He's not your typical La Masia product. He wants to attack. That's what makes him useful. And I mean, look at his orgasmic shooting.
A little touch off to Fermin Lopez. Oh yes! Through the eye of the needle.
He's another player who gives Flick a lot of energy without the ball. Then there's Marc Bernal. And Bernal might be the most interesting long-term player because he was built in Barca's child labor factory to play as the holding midfielder for Barca. He's 6'4", calm under pressure, and on the ball, he moves like a player who should be a foot shorter. By then, I mean he's more agile and he's much better on the ball like a small guy. I hope that kind of made sense. Otherwise, I was just glazing him the way George Janko was glazing Andrew Tate. Bernal can receive the ball from the center backs, invite pressure towards him, and then play through it. Defensively, he can cover ground, intercept passes, and actually compete physically with other massive midfielders. Now, Rodri arriving means Bernal doesn't need to immediately become a Barcelona starter, and that's a very good thing. Let the kid develop without everyone expecting him to become Busquets tomorrow. And finally, there's Frenkie de Jong. Frenkie gives Barca something that none of the other midfielders can do at the same level that he does. And that's ball carrying. If a team presses Barca and closes all the obvious passing lanes, Frenkie can say screw your passing lanes and just run through the press himself. He'll drop next to the center backs, receive the ball, turn, and just start carrying it forward. And once it gets moving, he's incredibly difficult to stop. That's why he's so useful against aggressive pressing teams. Because sometimes you don't need some ridiculous 40-yard pass to break the press. You need Frenkie to dribble past the first guy, and suddenly their entire defensive structure is screwed. This is what makes Barca's midfield depth so exciting. They don't have 7 versions of the same player. Rodri gives you control and security. Pedri gives you creativity. Gavi gives you aggression. Olmo gives you final third quality. Fermin Lopez gives you goals and runs into the box. Bernal gives you another pivot and goals, and Frenkie gives you progression through his ball carrying. Depending on what the game needs, Flick has a different weapon for everything. To see just how good Flick has been as a manager, you have to watch this video right here.